The selection ceremony was supposed to be a death sentence, until the Alpha King himself chose the girl everyone called Cursed. Tonight, we're diving into the brutal world of Kiera Voss, a woman marked for exile, feared by her own people, and invisible to everyone, except the one man who could destroy her with a single word. This is a story of survival, forbidden power, and a love that breaks every rule. If you're watching from anywhere in the world, drop your city in the comments below. Let's see how far this story reaches. And don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe, because this journey is just beginning. The square stank of desperation and cheap wine. Kiera stood at the very edge of the platform, where the wood was splintered and stained dark from years of rain and God knows what else. Her hands were bound, not with rope, but with iron cuffs that bit into her wrists whenever she moved. The other women around her wore thin dresses meant to flatter, to catch the eye of whichever alpha or pack leader had coin enough to claim them. Kiera wore gray, shapeless, colorless, deliberately ugly. No one was supposed to want her. That was the point. "Step forward when your name is called," the officiant droned from his podium, his voice echoing across the crowd that had gathered in the central square of Asheville. Hundreds of people, maybe 1,000. All of them here for the same reason, the selection ceremony. It happened twice a year, spring and fall. Women without family, without status, without protection were brought to the platform and offered up like livestock. The alphas took their pick. The rest were sent to the outlands, which was a polite way of saying they'd be dead within a month. Kiera had tried to run once, 3 years ago, when she was 16. They'd caught her before she even made it past the southern gate, broke 2 of her ribs and locked her in the holding cells for a week. After that, she learned, you didn't run from the selection. You endured it, or you died trying. Mara Fletcher, a blonde girl 2 rows ahead, stepped forward, her chin high, her dress a soft blue that made her eyes look brighter. A beta from the Ironwood pack raised his hand almost immediately. The officiant nodded, and Mara was led off the platform without a word. No ceremony, no vows, just a transaction. Kiera watched her go and felt nothing. Senna Hale. Another girl. Another claim. This one went to a merchant from the Eastern Territories, a man twice her age with a belly that strained against his vest. Senna didn't resist. She knew better. The ceremony moved fast. Too fast. Kiera counted the women ahead of her. 11, then 10, then 7. Her heart beat harder with each name called, each claim made. She told herself it didn't matter. No one would choose her. No one ever did. She was the cursed girl, the one whose mother had died screaming, the one whose touch, they said, brought rot and ruin. It wasn't true. Not all of it, anyway. But truth didn't matter when fear did the talking. Kiera Voss. Her name cut through the air like a blade. She stepped forward. The crowd shifted. Murmurs rippled outward, low and ugly. She didn't look at them. She kept her eyes on the officiant, on the worn leather of his book, on anything except the faces staring at her like she was a thing to be pitied or feared. Silence stretched. No one raised a hand. No one spoke. The officiant cleared his throat. "Kiera Voss," he repeated louder this time, as if volume would make a difference. 19 years, no family, no pack affiliation, no prior claims. Still nothing. Kiera felt the weight of it settle over her shoulders, the certainty that this was it, the Outlands. She'd known it was coming, had prepared for it as best she could. She had a knife hidden in her boot, a small pouch of dried meat sewn into the lining of her dress. It wouldn't be enough. It never was. But maybe she'd last longer than the others. Maybe she'd... "I'll take her." The voice came from the back of the square, deep, cold, unmistakable. The crowd parted like water. Kiera's breath stopped. She knew who it was before she saw him. Everyone did. You didn't grow up in the Northern Territories without knowing the name, the reputation, the legend. Ray's Dern, Alpha King of the Frostbound Throne. He walked through the crowd like a storm-given human form, tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in black leather and steel that caught the late afternoon light. His hair was dark, cut short, and his eyes were the color of winter ice, sharp, unreadable, dangerous. He didn't smile. He didn't need to. The officiant stammered. Your Majesty, This is highly irregular. Is she available or not? Ray's tone didn't rise, but the air around him seemed to drop 10 degrees. She is, but then she's mine. No negotiation, no hesitation, just fact. Kiera stared at him, her mind spinning. This didn't make sense. The Alpha King didn't come to selection ceremonies. He didn't need to. Women threw themselves at his feet. Entire packs offered their daughters for a chance at his favor. And he chose her? Step down, the officiant said quietly, his hand shaking as he gestured toward the stairs. Kiera's legs moved on instinct. She descended the platform, her wrists still bound, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might crack a rib. Ray's didn't move. He stood at the base of the stairs, waiting, his expression carved from stone. When she reached the bottom step, he spoke. Can you walk? It took her a second to find her voice. Yes. Good. Keep up. Awesome. He turned and walked. She followed. The crowd didn't whisper. They roared. Kiera heard snatches of it as she passed. Disbelief, outrage, confusion. Someone shouted a question about protocol. Someone else laughed, sharp and bitter. She kept her eyes forward, her shoulders tight, her hands clenched despite the iron cutting into her skin. Ray's led her through the square and down a narrow street that opened into a wider avenue lined with market stalls and storefronts. People stopped to stare. A few bowed. Most just watched, their faces a mix of shock and something darker. Kiera had never been this far into the city center before. The holding cells were on the outskirts, near the walls. She'd only ever seen Asheville from a distance, gray stone buildings, slate roofs, smoke rising from 100 chimneys. Up close, it was louder, dirtier, more alive than she'd expected. Ray's didn't speak, didn't look back. He walked with the kind of certainty that came from never being questioned, never being stopped. Kiera followed a few steps behind, her boots scraping against the cobblestones, her breath coming fast. They reached a courtyard where a carriage waited, black lacquered wood, gold trim, horses that looked too clean, too expensive to be real. A driver stood beside it, his face carefully neutral. He opened the door without a word. Ray's climbed inside. Kiera hesitated. Get in, Ray said. Not a command. Not quite, but close enough. She got in. The interior was lined with dark velvet and polished wood. It smelled faintly of leather and something sharper, pine, maybe, or frost. Ray's sat across from her, his arms crossed, his gaze fixed somewhere past her shoulder. The driver closed the door. The carriage lurched forward. Kiera counted to 10 before she spoke. Why? Ray's eyes flicked to hers. Why what? Why did you choose me? Does it matter? Yes. He studied her for a long moment, and she had the unsettling feeling that he was looking through her rather than at her. Cataloging. Calculating. You're useful, he said finally. Useful. That's what I said. I don't understand. You don't need to. Kiera's jaw tightened. She wanted to argue, to demand a real answer, but something in his tone told her it would be pointless. Ray's didn't explain himself. He didn't have to. She leaned back against the seat, her wrists aching, her mind racing. Useful. What did that even mean? She had no skills, no training, no connections. She was a ghost, a curse, a girl no one wanted. And now she belonged to the most powerful man in the Northern Territories. The thought made her stomach turn. The journey took 3 hours. By the time the carriage finally stopped, the sun had dropped below the horizon, leaving the sky a bruised purple. Kiera's legs were stiff, her wrists raw from the cuffs she still wore. Ray's hadn't spoken again. He'd spent the entire ride staring out the window, his expression unreadable, his posture rigid. The driver opened the door, and Ray's stepped out without waiting. Kiera followed. They were in front of a palace. No, that wasn't the right word. Palaces were warm, golden, full of light and life. This place was a fortress. Black stone walls rose 50 feet high, crowned with iron spikes and parapets. Towers jutted into the sky like broken teeth. The gate was iron, reinforced with steel, and guarded by 2 men in full armor who didn't so much as blink when Ray's approached. He walked through. Kiera followed. Inside, the courtyard was vast and empty. Torches burned in iron sconces along the walls, casting long shadows across the stone. The air was cold, colder than it should have been, even for late autumn. Kiera shivered. Rays stopped in front of a set of double doors carved with intricate patterns, wolves, trees, something that might have been a crown. He pushed them open without knocking. Beyond was a hall, long, wide, lined with columns that stretched up into darkness. At the far end, a throne sat on a raised dais carved from pale stone and draped with furs. Empty. Rays didn't look at it. He turned left, down a corridor lit by more torches, his footsteps echoing against the stone. Kiera hurried to keep up, her heart pounding, her mind screaming questions she didn't dare ask. They stopped in front of another door, this one smaller, plainer. Rays opened it and stepped aside. "This is yours." Kiera looked past him into the room. It was a room, a bed, a window, a table with a single chair, nothing special, nothing cruel, just functional. She stepped inside. Rays didn't follow. "Someone will bring you food," he said, "and clothes. You'll stay here tonight. And tomorrow? We'll talk tomorrow." "About what?" His eyes met hers, cold and sharp. "About what's expected of you." Before she could respond, he pulled the door shut. Kiera stood in the center of the room, her wrists still bound, her breath shaking, and for the first time in years, she let herself cry. She didn't sleep. How could she? Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the selection platform, the crowd, Rays's face when he said, "I'll take her." None of it made sense. None of it felt real, useful. The words circled in her head like a vulture. Around midnight, someone knocked. Kiera sat up, her heart jumping into her throat. "Come in," she said, her voice hoarse. The door opened and a woman stepped inside, middle-aged, gray-haired, dressed in plain brown wool. She carried a tray of food and a bundle of fabric. "I'm Marin," the woman said. "The king asked me to see to you." Kiera blinked. "The king has staff?" Marin's mouth twitched. "He has a few of us, enough to keep the place from falling apart." She set the tray on the table and gestured to Kiera's wrists. "May I?" Kiera held out her hands. Marin produced a small key and unlocked the cuffs. They fell to the floor with a dull clang. Kiera rubbed her wrists, wincing at the raw, angry marks left behind. "Eat," Marin said. "You'll need your strength." "For what?" Marin didn't answer. She just set the bundle of clothes on the bed. A simple dress, dark green, and a pair of soft boots, and turned toward the door. "Wait," Kiera said. "Can I ask you something?" Marin paused. "You can ask." "Why did he choose me?" The older woman's expression softened, just for a moment. "I don't know, girl. But if the king wanted you here, there's a reason. Whether it's a good one or not, well, you'll find out soon enough." She left. Kiera stared at the food, bread, cheese, some kind of stew, and forced herself to eat. Not because she was hungry, because Marin was right. She'd need her strength. Morning came too fast. Kiera woke to sunlight streaming through the window and the sound of voices in the corridor. She dressed quickly, pulling on the green dress and boots Marin had left. They fit well enough, better than anything she'd worn in years. The knock came at dawn. "Enter," Kiera said. It wasn't Marin this time. It was a man, young, maybe 25, with sandy hair and a scar running from his temple to his jaw. He wore the same black leather and steel as Rays, and his hand rested on the hilt of a sword at his hip. "The king wants to see you," he said. "Now." Kiera's stomach dropped. "Where?" "The council chamber. Follow me." She did. The fortress was a maze. Hallways branched into stairwells, stairwells opened into courtyards. Courtyards led to more hallways. Kiera tried to keep track, but it was useless. She'd be lost within minutes if she ever tried to navigate on her own. They stopped in front of a heavy wooden door. The man knocked twice. "Enter," Rays's voice called from inside. The man opened the door and stepped aside. Kiera walked in. The room was smaller than she'd expected. Rectangular, lined with bookshelves, dominated by a long table in the center. Rays stood at the far end, his back to her, studying a map spread across the surface. He didn't turn. Close the door. She did. Silence stretched. Finally, Reyes looked up. His gaze swept over her once, clinical and detached. Sit. There was a chair at the near end of the table. Kiera sat. Reyes didn't. I assume you have questions, he said. A few. Ask. Kiera swallowed. Why am I here? You're here because I need a wife. The words hit her like a punch to the gut. A wife. That's what I said. You don't know me. I don't need to. That's insane. Reyes' expression didn't change. It's politics. Kiera stared at him. I don't understand. You don't need to understand. You just need to play the part. What part? The part of my wife. In public, in court, when it matters. He leaned forward, his hands braced against the table. You'll attend events. You'll smile. You'll stand beside me and make it look convincing. That's all? And in private? In private, you stay out of my way. Kiera's hands clenched in her lap. So I'm... what? A prop? If that's how you want to think of it, yes. And if I refuse? Reyes straightened. His eyes were ice. Then I'll send you back to Ashevale, and you can take your chances in the Outlands. Your choice. Kiera's throat tightened. She wanted to scream, to throw something, to tell him exactly what he could do with his politics and his cold, calculated lies. But she didn't, because he was right. She had no choice. Fine, she said quietly. I'll do it. Reyes nodded once. Good. We'll be married in 3 days. Until then, Marin will teach you what you need to know. And after? After you do your job, I'll do mine. And we stay out of each other's way. He turned back to the map, dismissing her. Kiera stood, her legs shaking, her mind reeling. She made it halfway to the door before she stopped. Why me? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Reyes didn't look up. Because no one will care if I don't love you. The words settled over her like frost. Kiera left without another word. Osmotis. The next 3 days passed in a blur. Marin was relentless. She taught Kiera how to walk, how to stand, how to speak without sounding like she'd crawled out of the gutter. She drilled her on court etiquette, on the names and faces of the nobles who mattered, on the exact angle to tilt her head when addressing someone of higher rank. Kiera hated every second of it. But she learned. Because survival meant adaptation. And she'd been surviving her entire life. The wedding was a farce. No guests, no celebration, just Reyes, Kiera, an officiant, and 2 witnesses who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. The vows were read. The papers were signed. Reyes slipped a ring onto her finger, simple gold, no stone, and that was it. They were married. Kiera felt nothing. That night, she stood alone in the suite Marin had moved her into, larger than her old room, with a sitting area and a fireplace and windows that overlooked the northern mountains. Reyes had his own chambers, separate, distant. She stared at the ring on her finger and wondered what she'd agreed to, and somewhere deep in the fortress, Reyes stood in front of a mirror and felt the ice creeping through his veins. The curse was patient, but it was coming. The first week as queen was worse than the Outlands would have been. At least in the Outlands, Kiera would have known her enemies. Here, they smiled at her with teeth bared and called it courtesy. The court gathered every 3rd day in the Great Hall, a cavernous room with vaulted ceilings and windows tall enough to let in slashes of gray light that did nothing to warm the stone. Nobles from across the northern territories came to present grievances, negotiate treaties, or simply be seen. Reyes presided from his throne, his posture rigid, his face carved from the same ice that crusted the mountain peaks visible through the windows. Kiera sat beside him on a smaller throne that felt like a punishment. She'd been introduced at the first gathering, presented like a curiosity, something to be examined and judged. Reyes had kept it brief. My wife, Queen Kiera. No explanation, no justification, just fact. The silence that followed had been deafening. Then the whispers started. She heard them even now, 3 gatherings later, as a minor lord from the eastern provinces droned on about grain taxes and trade routes. The nobles didn't bother to lower their voices. They wanted her to hear. Did you see her hands? Scarred like a common laborer. I heard she was pulled from the selection. Can you imagine? The king married refuse. Perhaps he's gone mad. It's the only explanation. Kiera kept her face blank. Marin had taught her that much. How to sit still, how to breathe through the anger, how to let the words slide off like rain on glass. But underneath, her hands were clenched so tight her nails bit into her palms. Reyes didn't react. He never did. He sat motionless, his gaze fixed on the Lord still speaking, his expression giving away nothing. For all the warmth he showed her, she might as well have been another piece of furniture. When the session finally ended, Reyes stood without a word and left through the side door reserved for the royal family. Kiera rose a beat later, her legs stiff, and followed. She'd learned that too, always a step behind, never beside, never equal. The corridor outside the hall was mercifully empty. Reyes walked fast, his boots striking the stone in a sharp rhythm. Kiera hurried to keep up. "They hate me," she said. Reyes didn't slow. "They don't know you well enough to hate you." "Then what do you call it?" "Suspicion. It'll pass." "When?" "When you stop caring what they think." Kiera bit back a response. Easy for him to say. He was born into power, raised in it, shaped by it. She was an outsider wearing a crown that didn't fit. They reached the intersection where the corridors split, one leading to Reyes's chambers, the other to hers. He stopped, his hand resting briefly on the hilt of the dagger at his belt. A habit, she'd noticed. He always touched a weapon when he was thinking. "There's a banquet tomorrow night," he said. "You'll attend." "Of course." "And you'll sit with the northern lords, make conversation. Smile." "I know my job." His eyes flicked to hers, sharp and assessing. "Do you?" "You've made it very clear." For a moment, something almost like irritation crossed his face. Then it was gone, smoothed over by that unreadable mask he wore like armor. "Good," he said. "Don't embarrass me." He walked away. Kiera stood in the corridor, her jaw tight, her chest aching with something she couldn't name. Anger, maybe, or loneliness, or both. She turned toward her own chambers and told herself it didn't matter. The banquet was exactly as miserable as she'd expected. The great hall had been transformed, long tables draped in dark fabric, candelabras burning with too bright flames, platters of food that smelled rich and unfamiliar. Musicians played something mournful in the corner, the notes echoing off the stone. Nobles filled the benches, dressed in velvets and furs, their laughter too loud, their eyes too sharp. Kiera wore a gown Marin had picked out, deep blue, embroidered with silver thread, cut to make her look regal instead of invisible. It worked, in a way. People looked at her now. They just didn't see anything worth respecting. She sat at the high table, 3 seats down from Reyes, flanked by Lord Corvin on her left and Lady Astrid on her right. Corvin was old, his face lined and hard, his voice like gravel. Astrid was younger, beautiful in a cold, brittle way, with pale hair and eyes that missed nothing. "So," Astrid said, lifting her wineglass in a mock toast, "how are you finding court life, Your Majesty?" The title was a blade wrapped in silk. Kiera forced a smile. "It's an adjustment." "I imagine so. The selection must seem like a distant memory now." "It does." "Tell me," Corvin said, leaning closer, "what did you do before the king chose you? Any particular skills?" "I survived." The words came out sharper than she'd intended. Corvin blinked. Astrid's smile widened. "How refreshingly honest," Astrid said. "Most queens would dress it up with talk of charity work or education. But survival, well, that's a skill we can all appreciate, isn't it?" Kiera met her gaze. "I thought so." Astrid laughed, bright and cutting. "Oh, I like her, Corvin. She has teeth." Corvin grunted and returned to his meal. The conversation drifted after that. Talk of winter preparations, supply lines, skirmishes along the western border. Kiera listened more than she spoke, filing away names and alliances, trying to map the invisible web of power that held the court together. Halfway through the third course, Reyes stood. The hall fell silent. "A toast," he said, his voice carrying effortlessly across the room. He lifted his glass, his gaze sweeping over the assembled nobles. "To loyalty, to strength, to the continued prosperity of the frostbound throne." "To the throne," the hall echoed. Everyone drank. Reyes sat. The noise resumed. Kiera watched him from the corner of her eye. He didn't look at her, didn't acknowledge her, just stared at his plate like the food offended him. "Does he ever smile?" she murmured. Astrid, who had somehow stayed close enough to hear, laughed softly. "Not that I've seen. Some say he can't, that the ice in his veins won't allow it." "The ice in his veins? Oh, you haven't heard the stories?" Astrid leaned in, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "They say the king is cursed, that he can't feel warmth, can't feel love, can't feel much of anything. Just cold. Always cold." Kira's stomach twisted. "That's ridiculous." "Is it?" Astrid tilted her head, studying Kiera like she was a puzzle to be solved. "You're his wife. You tell me." Before Kiera could answer, a commotion erupted near the far end of the hall. Raised voices. The scrape of a chair. A man stood, young, broad-shouldered, his face flushed with drink or anger or both. He pointed at Rays. "You expect us to follow a king who hides behind a cursed bride?" he shouted. The hall went silent. Rays stood slowly, his movements deliberate. "Say that again." The man faltered, but only for a second. Liquid courage, Kiera thought, the kind that got people killed. "You heard me," the man said. "She's a curse. Everyone knows it. And you brought her here into the heart of the kingdom, like you're daring the gods to strike us down." "Her name," Ray said, his voice dropping to something deadly, "is Kiera. She's your queen, and if you value your tongue, you'll address her with the respect she's owed." The man laughed, wild, reckless. "Respect? For a selection girl? You've lost your mind." Rays moved. One moment he was at the table. The next he was across the hall, his hand wrapped around the man's throat, lifting him off his feet. "You want to test me?" Rays' voice was ice-given sound. "Go ahead. See how far it gets you." The man choked, his hands scrabbling at Rays' grip. "Your Majesty," Corvin said, standing. "He's drunk. He doesn't know what he's saying." "He knows exactly what he's saying." Rays didn't look away from the man's face. "And he'll apologize. Now." The man gasped. I'm sorry." Rays dropped him. The man crumpled to the floor, coughing, his face red. Rays turned and walked back to the high table without another word. Kira's hands were shaking. The hall remained silent as Rays sat. He picked up his glass and drank, his expression unchanged, as if he hadn't just nearly killed a man in front of 100 witnesses. "Well," Astrid murmured, "that was exciting." Kiera didn't respond. She couldn't. Her heart was hammering too hard, her mind replaying the moment over and over, the speed, the violence, the cold precision of it. Rays had defended her, but not because he cared, because she was his possession, his political tool. The distinction felt important. She found him later that night in the armory. It was tucked away in the lower levels of the fortress, a long room lined with weapons, swords, axes, spears, all gleaming and sharp. Ray stood at a workbench, sharpening a blade, the rhythmic scrape of steel on stone the only sound. Kiera hesitated in the doorway. She hadn't planned this, hadn't thought it through. But after the banquet, after the whispers and the violence and the cold, empty walk back to her chambers, she couldn't sit still. "You shouldn't be here," Ray said without looking up. "Neither should you. It's past midnight." "I don't sleep much." "Neither do I." He paused, the blade resting against the stone. "What do you want?" Kiera stepped inside, her arms crossed. "An explanation." "About?" "Tonight. That man. You could have killed him." "I should have." "Why didn't you?" Ray set the blade down and finally looked at her. His eyes were tired, she realized. Not physically, something deeper, older. "Because dead men can't spread the message," he said. "Let him live. Let him talk. And everyone knows what happens when they disrespect the crown." "You mean disrespect me?" "You're part of the crown now." Kiera laughed, bitter and sharp. "I'm a prop, remember? You said so yourself." "I said you had a job to do." "And what's your job exactly? To treat me like I'm invisible except when it's convenient?" Ray's jaw tightened. "You don't understand the position we're in. Then explain it to me." "Why?" "So you can argue, question every decision I make?" "So I can do my job properly," Kiera snapped. "You want me to play the part? Fine. But I can't do that if I don't know what the hell I'm playing. Silence stretched between them, thick and tense. Reyes exhaled slowly. There are factions within the court, he said. Lords who think I'm too young, too untested. They're waiting for me to make a mistake so they can move against me. And marrying me was a mistake? Marrying you was calculated, a move they didn't expect. It keeps them off balance. Because I'm worthless. Because you're unknown, Reyes corrected. No family ties, no alliances. No one can use you as leverage. Kiera stared at him. That's why you chose me. Not because I was useful. Because I was safe. Safety and usefulness aren't mutually exclusive. And what happens when they realize I'm not a threat, when they stop caring? Then you make them care. How? Reyes picked up the blade again, testing the edge with his thumb. You prove you're more than what they think you are. I don't know how to do that. Then learn. Kiera wanted to scream or cry or throw something. Instead, she turned and walked toward the door. Kiera, she stopped. You did well tonight, Reyes said quietly. At the banquet, you held your ground. It wasn't much. Barely a compliment, but it was the first kind thing he'd said to her since the wedding. Thank you, she said. She left before he could take it back. The next morning, Marin found her in the library, a room Kiera had discovered by accident, tucked away on the third floor, lined floor to ceiling with books she'd never have time to read. There's a problem, Marin said without preamble. Kiera looked up from the text on Northern history she'd been pretending to understand. What kind of problem? The kind that involves the Northern lords demanding an audience with you, alone. Kiera's stomach dropped. Why? They want to test you. See if you're worth their loyalty. And if I'm not? Marin's expression was grim. Then they'll push for an annulment, or worse. Worse? Use your imagination. Kiera set the book aside. When? This afternoon. The king doesn't know yet. I'm telling you first because you need to decide how you want to handle this. What do you mean? I mean, Marin said, you can refuse. Let Reyes deal with it. Or you can face them yourself and show them you're not as weak as they think. Kiera's hands trembled. What would you do? I'd walk into that room and make them regret underestimating me. I'm not you. No, Marin said. But you're a survivor, and survivors don't run. The meeting took place in a chamber Kiera had never seen before. Small, windowless, lit by a single chandelier that cast more shadows than light. 5 lords waited inside, seated around a circular table. She recognized 2 of them from the banquet, Corvan and a younger man with a scar across his cheek. They didn't stand when she entered. Kiera took the empty seat without waiting for an invitation. Gentlemen, she said, I hear you wanted to speak with me. Corvan leaned back in his chair. We have concerns, Your Majesty. About? About your ability to fulfill the role you've been given. Kiera forced her face to remain neutral. I wasn't aware my abilities were in question. You're untested, the scarred man said. Unproven. The king married you for reasons we don't fully understand, but that doesn't mean we're required to accept you. Accept me or not, Kiera said. I'm still your queen. Are you? Corvin's smile didn't reach his eyes. But, 'Cause from where we sit, you're a girl playing dress-up. And when winter comes, when the real challenges begin, we need to know you won't break. Kiera met his gaze. What do you want from me? Proof, another lord said. Show us you're more than a selection cast-off. How? Handle the grain dispute in the southern provinces, Corvin said. The merchants are refusing to pay the crown's tariff. Resolve it, without the king's help. It was a trap. Kiera could see it in their faces. The smug certainty that she'd fail, that she'd run crying to Reyes, that she'd prove them right. She could refuse. Walk out. Let Reyes handle it. Or she could do what Marin said. Make them regret it. Fine, Kiera said. I'll handle it. Corvin blinked. You will? That's what I said. She stood. Is there anything else, or are we done here? The lords exchanged glances. We're done, Corvin said slowly. Kiera left without another word. Outside, her hands were shaking so badly she had to press them against the wall to steady herself. She'd just agreed to something she had no idea how to do. But she'd figure it out. She had to. She found Reyes in this council chamber that evening, bent over the same map he'd been studying the day she arrived. "I need to go to the southern provinces," she said. He looked up, his expression unreadable. "Why?" "The northern lords gave me a task, the grain dispute. They want me to resolve it." Reyes straightened. "And you agreed?" "Yes." "Without talking to me first. You're not my keeper." His eyes narrowed. "You're my wife, which means your actions reflect on me." "Then maybe you should have thought of that before you married someone you won't even look at." The words hung between them, sharp and raw. Reyes' jaw tightened. "This is a mistake." "Maybe, but it's mine to make." "You don't know what you're walking into." "Then tell me." He stared at her for a long moment. Then he turned back to the map. "The merchants in the south are organized, stubborn. They've been avoiding the tariff for months because they know the crown won't risk a full crackdown. Too much unrest. So what do I do?" "You negotiate. Find out what they want. Give them just enough to make them feel like they've won. Then take what you need. And if they refuse?" Reyes' smile was cold. "Then you remind them who holds the power." Kiera nodded slowly. "I'll leave in the morning." "You'll take an escort." "I don't need—" "You'll take an escort," Reyes repeated, his tone leaving no room for argument. "4 guards. Marin, if she's willing, and you'll report back within a week." "Fine." She turned to leave. "Kiera." She stopped. "Don't make me regret this." "I won't," she said. But as she walked back to her chambers, she wondered if that was a promise she could keep. The southern provinces were nothing like the fortress. Where Reyes' stronghold was all black stone and sharp edges, the merchant town sprawled across the valley in a mess of timber and thatch, smoke rising from 100 chimneys, the air thick with the smell of livestock and bread and unwashed bodies. The roads were mud, churned up by cartwheels and boots, and the people moved with a kind of frantic energy that made Kiera's head spin. She'd been traveling for 3 days. 4 guards flanked her carriage, silent, efficient, their hands never far from their weapons. Marin sat across from her, knitting something shapeless and gray, her needles clicking in a rhythm that should have been soothing, but only made Kiera more anxious. "Stop fidgeting," Marin said without looking up. Kiera forced her hands to still in her lap. "I'm not fidgeting." "You've been picking at that thread on your sleeve for the last hour." Kiera looked down. There was, in fact, a loose thread. She tucked her hands under her thighs. "What if they don't listen to me?" she asked. "Then you make them listen." "How?" Marin finally looked up, her eyes sharp. "You're the queen. Act like it." The carriage lurched to a stop. One of the guards opened the door, his face impassive. "We've arrived, Your Majesty." Kiera stepped out into chaos. The market square was packed. Stalls selling everything from vegetables to cheap jewelry, children running underfoot, a dog barking somewhere in the distance. And in the center of it all, a platform where a man stood shouting at a crowd that looked ready to riot. "The crown bleeds us dry, while the king sits in his fortress counting gold," the man yelled. He was middle-aged, his face red, his voice hoarse from overuse. "We break our backs to feed the kingdom, and what do we get? Higher taxes. More demands!" The crowd roared approval. Kiera's stomach sank. "That's Garen," Marin said quietly, appearing at her shoulder. "The merchant leader. He's been stirring up trouble for months." "He looks angry." "He is, and he's not wrong about some of it." "That's not helpful." "Truth rarely is." Kiera took a breath and started walking toward the platform. The guards moved with her, forming a loose perimeter. People noticed. Heads turned. The shouting died down, replaced by murmurs that rippled through the crowd like wind through wheat. Garen stopped mid-sentence. His eyes landed on Kiera, and something like recognition flickered across his face. "Well," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "looks like the king sent his little bride to do his dirty work." Laughter erupted from the crowd. Harsh, mocking. Kiera climbed the steps to the platform. Her legs felt like water, but she kept her face blank. regal, the way Marin had taught her. "My name is Kiera Dern," she said, projecting her voice the way she'd practiced in the empty corridors of the fortress. "I'm here to discuss the tariff dispute." "Discuss?" Garen snorted. "There's nothing to discuss. We're not paying." "Then we have a problem." "The only problem here is the crown's greed." Kiera met his gaze. "The tariff funds the roads you use, the soldiers who protect your trade routes, the infrastructure that keeps this kingdom from falling apart. You benefit from it. You should contribute to it." "Contribute?" Garen stepped closer, his voice dropping to something dangerous. "We contribute our sweat, our time, our lives. And the crown takes and gives nothing back. That's not true. Isn't it?" He turned to the crowd. "Tell her. Tell the queen what the crown has done for you." Silence. Heavy and accusatory. Kira's heart hammered. She'd prepared arguments, numbers, logic, but standing here, facing a sea of hostile faces, none of it seemed to matter. "I'm not your enemy," she said quietly. "No," Garen agreed. "You're just the messenger, but the message is the same. Pay or suffer." "That's not what I'm saying." "Then what are you saying?" Kiera hesitated. She could feel the moment slipping away from her, the crowd's anger solidifying into something immovable. She needed to give them something, a concession, a reason to believe she wasn't just another noble who didn't care. "What if we lowered the tariff?" she said. The crowd went silent. Garen blinked. "What?" "What if I negotiated a reduction? Temporary, 6 months, enough to give you breathing room while we work out a long-term solution." "And what does the crown get in exchange?" "Compliance. You pay the reduced rate, no exceptions, no delays, and we revisit the terms before winter." Garen studied her, his expression unreadable. "You have the authority to make that deal?" Kiera didn't. Raze would probably kill her for even suggesting it, but she kept her voice steady. "I do." Garen glanced at the crowd, then back at her. "Prove it. Put it in writing, signed and sealed. Then we'll talk." "Fine. I'll have the documents ready by morning." "Good." Garen stepped back, his arms crossed. "We'll be waiting." Kiera descended the platform, her legs shaking, her mind racing. She just made a promise she had no idea if she could keep. Marin was waiting at the base of the steps, her expression carefully neutral. That was bold. That was stupid. Maybe, but it worked. For now. They walked back to the inn where they'd be staying, a squat building with peeling paint and a roof that looked one strong wind away from collapse. The room Kiera was given was small, the bed lumpy, the window stuck half open. She didn't care. She sat on the edge of the bed and put her head in her hands. A knock came at the door an hour later. "Come in," Kiera said. Marin entered carrying a tray of food and a folded piece of parchment. "Eat first, then we'll draft the agreement." "I don't know what I'm doing." "You're doing what needs to be done." Marin set the tray down and sat beside her. "You made a choice. A good one. Now you follow through." Raze is going to be furious, probably, but he'll respect the outcome if it works. "And if it doesn't?" Marin's smile was thin. "Then we deal with that when it happens." They worked through the night, drafting and redrafting the terms until the words blurred together. By dawn, Kiera had something resembling an official agreement, signed with her name, sealed with wax she'd borrowed from the innkeeper. Garen met her in the market square at midday. The crowd was smaller this time, but no less hostile. He read the document slowly, his lips moving, his brow furrowed. Finally, he looked up. "This is real?" "It's real." "And the king agreed to this?" Kiera's throat tightened. "He trusts my judgment." It wasn't a lie. Not exactly. Raze had told her to negotiate. She was negotiating. Garen folded the parchment and tucked it into his coat. "All right. You've got a deal." Relief washed over her so fast she nearly swayed. "Good. I'll expect the first payment within the week. You'll get it." He extended his hand. Kiera shook it, her grip firm despite the tremor in her fingers. The crowd began to disperse, the tension draining from the square like water from a broken dam. Kiera watched them go, her chest tight, her mind already racing ahead to what came next. She'd done it. Against all odds, she'd actually done it. Marin appeared at her elbow. We should leave, before anyone changes their mind. Agreed. They returned to the carriage, and within the hour, they were on the road back to the fortress. Kiera stared out the window, watching the southern provinces fade into the distance, and allowed herself a moment of fragile, cautious pride. It didn't last long. They arrived at the fortress after dark, the gates opening with a groan of metal on stone. Kiera climbed out of the carriage, her body aching from days of travel, her mind exhausted. One of Ray's guards was waiting in the courtyard. "The king wants to see you," he said. "Immediately." Kiera's stomach dropped. "Where?" "His chambers." She followed the guard through the maze of corridors, her heart pounding harder with every step. Ray's chambers were in the oldest part of the fortress, past the council room and down a narrow hallway lit by flickering torches. The guard knocked once and stepped aside. "Enter," Ray's voice called. Kiera pushed the door open. The room was larger than hers, but just as cold. A fireplace dominated one wall, but the hearth was empty, the grate dark. Ray stood by the window, his back to her, his hands clasped behind him. "Close the door," he said. She did. Silence stretched. Kiera's hands twisted in her skirt. "I heard about your deal," Ray said finally. "Good news travels fast." It wasn't good news. He turned, and the look on his face made her breath catch. He was angry. Not the cold, controlled anger she'd seen before. This was something raw. "You had no authority to lower the tariff. You told me to negotiate. I told you to find out what they wanted and take what we needed, not to give away the crown's revenue. It's temporary, 6 months, and it solves the problem." "It undermines me," Ray snapped. "Every lord in the kingdom will hear about this and think they can negotiate their way out of their obligations. Or they'll see that the crown is willing to listen, to compromise. Compromise is weakness. Compromise is survival," Kiera shot back. "You should know that better than anyone." Ray's jaw tightened. For a moment she thought he might yell. Instead, he exhaled slowly, his hands unclenching. "You took a risk," he said quietly. "A stupid one. But it worked. This time. Then I'll make sure it works next time, too." Ray's stared at her, his expression unreadable. Then, to her shock, his mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but close. "You're more stubborn than I thought," he said. "You married me for a reason." I'm starting to remember why. The words hung in the air, strange and unexpected. Kiera didn't know what to say. Ray's turned back to the window. "You're dismissed." Kiera left, her mind spinning. Something had shifted. She didn't know what, but she felt it. Over the next 2 weeks, things changed in ways Kiera hadn't anticipated. Ray started seeking her out. Not often, not obviously, but enough that she noticed. He'd ask her opinion on minor disputes, invite her to sit in on council meetings. Once, he even asked her to review a trade agreement before he signed it. "You have a good eye for loopholes," he'd said. "I had a lot of practice surviving," she'd replied. He'd almost smiled. The court noticed too. The whispers changed, not kind exactly, but less vicious. She wasn't just the cursed bride anymore. She was the queen who'd handled the southern provinces. The queen who had the king's ear. It should have felt like a victory. Instead, it felt dangerous. Because late at night, when the fortress was quiet and Kiera lay awake in her too large bed, she realized something terrifying. She was starting to care what Ray's thought, not as a queen worried about her position, as a woman worried about the man who'd given her a chance when no one else would. It was a problem, a big one. She tried to ignore it, tried to focus on her duties, on learning the intricacies of court politics, on proving she deserved to be here. But every time Ray's looked at her, really looked at her, like she was more than just a tool, the feeling grew stronger. And then, one night, everything fell apart. It started with a scream. Kiera jolted awake, her heart racing. For a moment, she thought she'd dreamed it. Then it came again, raw, agonized, echoing through the stone corridors. She threw off the blankets and ran to the door, yanking it open. Guards were already rushing past, their faces grim. "What's happening?" she asked. "The king," one of them said. "Something's wrong." Kira's blood turned to ice. She ran. She didn't know where she was going, just followed the guards, followed the sound of voices, followed the sick feeling in her gut that told her this was bad. They led her to Ray's chambers. The door was open. Inside, chaos. Marin was there, barking orders at a man Kiera didn't recognize. Thin, gray-haired, carrying a leather bag that marked him as some kind of healer. And in the center of it all, Ray's. He was on the floor, his back against the wall, his face pale, his breath coming in shallow gasps. His hands were pressed to his chest, and even from the doorway, Kiera could see the way his fingers trembled. "What happened?" she demanded. Marin looked up, her expression stricken. "The curse. It's activated." Kira's world tilted. "What curse?" "The one he's been carrying his entire life." Marin's voice was tight. "The one that kills him if he falls in love." The words didn't make sense. Couldn't make sense. That's insane," Kiera said. "It's real." Marin grabbed her arm, her grip bruising. "And it's killing him right now." Kira's gaze snapped to Ray's. His eyes found hers, and for the first time since she'd met him, she saw fear. "Get out," he rasped. "No." "Kiera, get out." "No." She crossed the room and dropped to her knees beside him. "What do I do? How do I stop this?" "You can't." His voice broke. "No one can." The healer stepped forward, his hands shaking as he opened his bag. "I can slow it, buy him time, but if the curse has fully activated, then what?" Kiera snapped. The healer didn't answer. Ray's hand shot out, grabbing her wrist. His skin was ice. "Listen to me," he said. "You need to leave, now, before—" His words cut off in a choking gasp. His body convulsed, his back arching, and Kiera watched in horror as frost began to spread across his skin, pale, glittering, deadly. "Do something!" she screamed at the healer. "I'm trying!" "Try harder." Marin pulled her back. "Kiera, you can't. Let go of me!" She wrenched free and lunged for Ray's, her hands finding his face, his chest, anywhere she could touch. His skin burned with cold, but she didn't care. "Don't you dare die on me," she said, her voice shaking. "Don't you dare." Ray's eyes locked on hers. "I'm sorry," he whispered, and then his body went still. For one terrible, infinite moment, Kiera thought he was gone. Then his chest rose. Barely, shallow, but there. The healer worked frantically, pouring something into Ray's mouth, pressing claws soaked in God's knew what to his skin. The frost receded, just slightly, but Ray's didn't wake. "How long does he have?" Kiera asked, her voice hollow. The healer didn't look at her. "Hours. Maybe less. There has to be something." "There isn't." Marin's voice was broken. "The curse is absolute. If he loves someone, it kills him. That's the price." Kiera stared at Ray's unconscious form, her mind racing, her heart shattering. He'd fallen in love with her, and it was going to kill him. Kiera didn't move from Ray's side. The healer had done what he could, wrapped Ray's in furs, forced some kind of bitter tea down his throat, muttered prayers to gods Kiera didn't believe in. None of it mattered. The frost still crept across Ray's skin in delicate, killing patterns. His breathing was shallow, his pulse weak. Every minute that passed, he slipped further away. Marin had tried to pull her out of the room twice. Kiera refused to leave. "There has to be something," she said for the 100th time, her voice raw. "Some way to break it." The healer, his name was Orange, she'd learned, shook his head. "Curses like this don't break. They're woven into the blood, into the soul. The only way to stop it is to stop the trigger." "He can't just stop loving someone." "No," Oren agreed quietly. "He can't." Kiera stared at Ray's face. Even unconscious, even dying, he looked hard, unyielding. But his hand, when she touched it, was fragile, human. "Who did this to him?" she asked. Marin, standing by the window, exhaled slowly. "His mother." Kira's head snapped up. "What?" "The queen before him. She was powerful and paranoid. She believed love made people weak, made them vulnerable. So she cursed her own son to ensure he'd never fall victim to it." "That's insane." "That's royalty. Marin's smile was bitter. She died when Reyes was 16. The curse stayed. And he's lived with this his whole life? Every day. Why do you think he keeps everyone at a distance? Why do you think he married you, someone he thought he could never care about? The words hit like a blade to the ribs. Kiera looked down at Reyes, at the frost climbing his throat, and something inside her cracked open. He'd chosen her because he thought she was safe, because he thought he'd never love her, and now he was dying because he'd been wrong. There has to be a way, she whispered. There isn't, Oren said. I'm sorry. Kira's hands clenched into fists. You keep saying that, but you're still here, which means you think there's a chance. Oren hesitated. Tell me, Kiera demanded. The healer glanced at Marin, who nodded. There are stories, Oren said slowly. Old ones. About curses being broken by unconventional means. What kind of means? Power, raw, uncontrolled, dangerous power. The kind that most people don't survive using. Kira's breath caught. You're talking about my curse. I'm talking about whatever it is you carry, Oren said carefully. The reason people feared you. The reason you were cast out. I don't have power. You're not just anything, Marin interrupted. Your mother died screaming, Kiera. The midwife went mad. The entire birthing room had to be burned. You think that's normal? Kira's chest tightened. She'd spent her whole life being told she was cursed, that she brought ruin and rot. But no one had ever explained what that meant, what she actually was. I don't know how to use it, she said. Then you'd better learn fast, Marin said, because he has maybe 2 hours left. They moved Reyes to a chamber deeper in the fortress, one Kiera had never seen before. The walls were bare stone, the floor marked with symbols she didn't recognize. It felt old, sacred, dangerous. Oren set up his supplies, candles, herbs, a bowl of water that steamed despite the cold. Marin stood guard at the door, her arms crossed, her face carved from stone. Kiera knelt beside Reyes, her hands shaking. What do I do? She asked. Oren didn't look up from the circle he was drawing in chalk. You reach inside yourself, find whatever's been locked away, and you pull it out. That's not an instruction. It's the best I can give you. He finished the circle and stood. Curses are personal. Breaking them requires something equally personal. You need to touch the curse directly, feel it, then use your power to tear it apart. And if I can't? Oren's silence was answer enough. Kiera placed her hands on Reyes' chest. The frost burned against her palms, but she didn't pull away. I'm going to try something, she said quietly, more to herself than to him. It's probably going to hurt. Maybe kill me. But if there's a chance... Kiera. She froze. Reyes' eyes were open, barely. His voice was a rasp, barely audible. Don't, he said. I have to. You'll die. Maybe. Maybe not. His hand found hers, his grip weak. I'm not worth it. Kiera laughed, sharp and broken. That's not your decision to make. Please. She leaned down, her forehead resting against his. You chose me when no one else would. You gave me a chance. Let me return the favor. Reyes' eyes closed. A single tear slipped down his cheek, freezing before it reached his jaw. Kiera straightened. Do it, she said to Oren. The healer began to chant, low, rhythmic, words in a language Kiera didn't know. The candles flared. The air grew heavy, pressing down on her lungs. Kiera closed her eyes and reached. At first, there was nothing, just darkness and the sound of her own heartbeat. Then slowly, she felt it, a thread of something cold and wrong, winding through Reyes' chest like a parasite. The curse. She grabbed it. Pain exploded through her body. White hot, searing, like her blood had turned to fire. She screamed, but she didn't let go. The curse fought back. It wrapped around her, trying to pull her under, trying to freeze her the way it was freezing Reyes. Kiera gritted her teeth and pulled harder. Somewhere deep inside her, something stirred. Something she'd spent her whole life ignoring, suppressing, pretending didn't exist. Her curse. No, not a curse. Power. It rose like a wave, crashing through her veins, flooding her senses. It was wild, untamed, too much for her body to contain, But she held on. She shaped it. She aimed it at the curse wrapped around Ray's heart and tore. The backlash hit like a hammer. Kiera flew backward, slamming into the wall hard enough to crack the stone. Her vision blurred. Blood filled her mouth. Somewhere far away, Marin was shouting. Orin was cursing, but it all sounded like it was underwater. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't... A hand touched her face. Warm. Human. Kiera? She forced her eyes open. Ray's was kneeling in front of her, his face pale but clear. No frost. No ice. Alive. You're insane, he said, his voice shaking. Kiera tried to laugh, but it came out as a cough. You're welcome. Then everything went black. Oh. She woke to firelight and the smell of something bitter. Her body ached. Not the sharp pain of before, but a deep, bone-tired exhaustion that made lifting her hand feel impossible. She was in a bed. Not hers, she realized. Ray's. Marin sat in a chair by the hearth, her knitting abandoned in her lap. When she saw Kiera's eyes open, she stood so fast the chair scraped against the floor. You're awake. Barely. Kiera's voice was hoarse. How long? 2 days. 2? Kiera tried to sit up and immediately regretted it. Her ribs screamed in protest. Easy. Marin crossed the room and pressed a hand to Kiera's shoulder, gently pushing her back down. You cracked 3 ribs, bruised your spine, and nearly bled out from internal injuries. You're lucky to be alive. Ray's? Alive. Awake. Furious. At me? At himself. Marin's expression softened. He hasn't left this room except to deal with the fallout. Fallout? Before Marin could answer, the door opened. Ray's walked in, and Kiera's breath caught. He looked different. Not physically, though the color had returned to his face, the ice gone from his veins. But something in the way he carried himself had changed. The walls he'd kept so carefully in place were gone, or at least cracked. He saw her awake and stopped. You're an idiot, he said. Nice to see you too. He crossed the room in 3 strides and sat on the edge of the bed. For a moment, he just stared at her, his jaw tight, his hands clenched. Then he took her hand. You could have died, he said quietly. So could you. I was supposed to die. That was the point. The point was stupid. Ray's mouth twitched. You sound like me. I learned from the best. He looked down at their joined hands. I don't know how to do this. Do what? This. Care about someone. I've spent my whole life avoiding it. And now... He broke off, his voice rough. You broke the curse, Kiera. You shouldn't have been able to. No one should have. But you did. I didn't have a choice. You always have a choice. Not when it comes to you. The words hung between them, raw and honest. Ray's eyes met hers. I don't deserve you. Probably not, but you're stuck with me anyway. He leaned forward, his forehead resting against hers. I'm sorry. For all of it. For treating you like a tool, for pushing you away, for... Stop. Kiera's free hand found his face. You were surviving. I understand that better than anyone. It's not an excuse. No. But it's a reason. She pulled back just enough to meet his gaze. What happens now? Ray's exhaled slowly. Now we deal with the court. They know about the curse, about what you did, and they're terrified. Of me? Of what you represent. Kiera's stomach sank. They think I'm dangerous. You are dangerous. You just saved my life with power no one understands. Half the court wants you exiled, the other half wants you dead. Great. And here I thought breaking a death curse would win me some friends. Ray's smile was grim. Welcome to politics. The council meeting was a nightmare. Kiera had insisted on attending despite Marin's protests. She was still weak, still bruised, but she refused to let them discuss her fate without her present. The council chamber was packed. Every lord who mattered was there, their faces ranging from suspicious to outright hostile. Kiera took her seat beside Ray's, her spine straight despite the pain, her hands folded in her lap. Lord Corvin stood first. Your Majesty, we're grateful for the Queen's intervention, but we cannot ignore the implications of what occurred. And what implications are those? Ray's voice was ice. She wielded power we don't understand. power that could be turned against us. She saved my life. This time, Lady Astrid said from across the table, but what about next time? What if she decides the crown is better off in her hands? Kiera stood. Every eye in the room turned to her. I don't want the crown, she said. I never did. I wanted to survive. And when survival meant saving the king, I did what I had to do. With forbidden magic, Corvin said. With the only thing I had. Kiera's voice sharpened. You've spent weeks telling me I'm worthless, that I don't belong here, that I'm nothing but a cursed selection girl, and the moment I prove I'm more than that, you want me gone. Make up your minds. Silence. Then, from the back of the room, a voice spoke. She has a point. Kiera turned. A man she didn't recognize stood, older, gray-bearded, dressed in simple wool. I'm Lord Thane. I rule the Western Territories. And I think we're missing the bigger picture. Which is? Corvin asked. The curse is broken. The king is alive. And the queen proved her loyalty in the most definitive way possible. We'd be fools to throw that away out of fear. Murmurs rippled through the room. She's unstable, Astrid argued. She's untrained, Thane corrected. There's a difference. Train her. Teach her to control what she has. And we gain an asset instead of a threat. Rays leaned forward. Lord Thane makes a valid point. The queen's power is unprecedented, but so is her loyalty. I propose we give her the resources to learn control, under supervision. And if she refuses? Corvin asked. Kiera met his gaze. I won't refuse. I don't want to hurt anyone, but I also won't be locked away or treated like a monster. You want me to prove I'm trustworthy? Give me the chance. Corvin studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. Very well. But if there's even a hint of... There won't be, Rays interrupted. I'll personally ensure it. The vote was close. Too close. But in the end, the council agreed. Kiera would stay, she would train, and she would prove herself. That night, Kiera stood on the balcony outside Rays' chambers, staring out at the mountains. The air was cold, biting, but she didn't mind. It felt clean, real. Rays joined her, 2 cups of wine in his hands. He offered her one. You didn't have to defend me, she said. Yes, I did. They'll use it against you. Say you're compromised. Let them. He took a sip of wine. I've spent my whole life making decisions based on fear. Fear of the curse, fear of weakness, fear of caring. I'm done with that. What changed? You. He turned to face her. You walked into a room full of people who wanted you gone and told them exactly who you were. No apologies, no fear, just truth. I was terrified. I know. That's what made it brave. Kiera looked at him, really looked at him, and saw something she'd never seen before. Hope. What happens now? She asked. Now we figure it out. Together. Together? Ray set down his cup and took her hand. I know I haven't been the husband you deserved. I know I've kept you at a distance, treated you like you didn't matter. But you do matter. And I want to try. If you'll let me. Kiera's throat tightened. I thought you didn't know how to do this. I don't, but I'm willing to learn. She smiled, small and fragile. Then I guess we're both learning. Rays pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her, and for the first time since she'd arrived at the fortress, Kiera felt warm.
What? The
weeks that followed were hard. Training her power was brutal. Oren had brought in specialists, mages, healers, scholars, all of them wary, all of them watching her like she might explode at any moment, and sometimes she almost did. Her power wasn't gentle. It was raw, violent, unpredictable. It fought her every step of the way, but slowly, painfully, she learned to shape it, to control it. Rays was there for most of it, not hovering, not interfering, just present, watching. And when she stumbled, when the power lashed out and left her shaking and bleeding, he was the one who caught her. You're getting better, he said one evening after a particularly brutal session. Kiera wiped blood from her nose. I almost took out half the training room. But you didn't. That's progress. That's luck. It's control. He handed her a cloth. You're learning. Slowly. Fast enough. She looked at him, at the way he watched her. Not with fear, not with suspicion, but with something that looked dangerously close to pride. "Why do you believe in me?" she asked. "Because you believe in yourself, even when you're terrified." "I'm always terrified." "I know." He smiled. "That's what makes you brave." Cool. The breakthrough came on a cold morning 3 weeks after the curse broke. Kiera stood in the center of the training room, her hands outstretched, her eyes closed. Power hummed beneath her skin, wild and restless. "Focus," Oren said from the edge of the circle. "Feel the energy. Don't force it. Guide it." Kiera breathed in, out, slow. The power rose, flooding her senses. But this time, instead of fighting it, she let it flow. She shaped it, gently, carefully, into something small, controlled. Light bloomed in her palms, soft, warm, steady. Oren's breath caught. "Hold it." Kiera held. The light didn't waver, didn't explode. It just burned, quiet and sure. "Good," Oren said quietly. "Very good." Kiera opened her eyes and stared at the light in her hands. It was beautiful, and it was hers. She let it fade and looked up to find Ray's standing in the doorway. He didn't say anything, just nodded once, his expression unreadable. But when she walked past him, he caught her hand and squeezed. That night, for the first time, the court didn't whisper when she entered the hall. They watched. They waited. And when she took her seat beside Ray's, some of them even bowed. It wasn't acceptance. Not yet. But it was a start. But respect from the court meant nothing when enemies moved in the shadows. The first assassination attempt came 3 days later. Kiera was walking through the eastern corridor, alone for once. Marin had gone to the kitchens, the guards were changing shifts, and Reyes was locked in a meeting with the War Council. She should have known better, should have waited, but she'd grown tired of being constantly watched, constantly protected. She heard the footsteps behind her too late. A hand clamped over her mouth, an arm locked around her throat. She was dragged backward into an alcove, her feet scraping against stone. "Should have stayed in the selection," a voice hissed in her ear. Male, young, unfamiliar. Kiera's training kicked in before her fear could. She slammed her elbow backward into her attacker's ribs. He grunted, his grip loosening just enough. She spun, her hand coming up, power flooding her veins. Light exploded from her palm. The man screamed. He fell backward, clutching his face, smoke rising from his hands. Kiera stood over him, her chest heaving, her power still crackling beneath her skin. Guards rounded the corner, weapons drawn. "Don't move!" one of them shouted. The attacker didn't. He was too busy writhing on the ground. Kiera let her power fade. Her hands were shaking. "He tried to kill me." The guard captain, a grizzled man named Torin, knelt beside the attacker and yanked his hands away from his face. Burns marked his skin, angry and red. "Who sent you?" Torin demanded. The man spat blood. "Go to hell." Torin's expression didn't change. "Take him to the cells. And get the healer. I want him alive for questioning." 2 guards hauled the man to his feet and dragged him away. Torin turned to Kiera. "Are you hurt?" "No?" "Good. The king will want to know about this immediately." "I'm sure he will." Torin escorted her to the council chamber where Reyes was still deep in discussion with Lord Corvin and 2 generals. When he saw her walk in with Torin at her side, his expression went dark. "What happened?" "Someone tried to kill me," Kiera said flatly. "I stopped them." Reyes stood so fast his chair scraped against the floor. "Where are they?" "The cells," Torin said. Burns on his face and hands. The queen defended herself. Reyes' gaze snapped to Kiera. "Are you hurt?" "I'm fine." "That wasn't the question. And I gave you the answer." Corvin cleared his throat. "Your Majesty, this is clearly a matter that requires—" "Get out," Reyes said, his eyes still on Kiera. Corvin blinked. "Excuse me?" "You, the generals, everyone, out, now." The room emptied fast. When the door closed, Reyes crossed to Kiera in 3 strides. His hands found her shoulders, his grip firm but careful. "Are you hurt?" he asked again, quieter this time. "No, I told you, I'm fine." "You could have been killed." "But I wasn't. I handled it." Reyes' jaw tightened. "You shouldn't have to handle it. Welcome to my life." "This isn't a joke, Kiera. I'm not laughing. She pulled free from his grip. Someone wants me dead. That's not new. What's new is that I can actually fight back. That's not the point. Then what is? Reyes exhaled, his hands clenching and unclenching. The point is that you're a target, and I can't... He stopped, his voice breaking. I can't lose you. The words settled between them, raw and honest. Kiera's anger drained. You won't. You don't know that. Neither do you. She stepped closer, her hand finding his. But I'm not running. I'm not hiding, and I'm not going to let fear win. Reyes stared at her for a long moment. Then he pulled her into his arms, his face buried in her hair. You're impossible, he murmured. I learned from you. Whoa. The interrogation took 2 days. The attacker, a minor noble's son named Eris, cracked under pressure. He confessed to being part of a conspiracy, a group of lords who believed Kiera's power made her too dangerous to live. They'd planned to kill her and make it look like an accident. Reyes' response was swift and brutal. The conspirators were arrested. Their lands were seized. And in a public trial held in the Great Hall, Reyes made an example of them. Kiera stood beside him on the dais, her hands folded, her face blank. She'd wanted to stay away, to let Reyes handle it, but he'd insisted she be there. They need to see you, he'd said. They need to understand what happens when they come for my queen. The trial was ugly. Confessions were read, evidence was presented. The conspirators tried to defend themselves, tried to argue that they'd been protecting the kingdom from a threat. Reyes didn't let them finish. You weren't protecting the kingdom, he said, his voice echoing through the hall. You were protecting yourselves, your power, your status, and you decided that the easiest way to do that was to kill a woman who'd done nothing but survive. She's dangerous, one of the conspirators, Lord Valen, shouted. She wields power we don't understand, power that could destroy us all. She used that power to save my life, Reyes said coldly, to break a curse no one else could touch. And instead of gratitude, you offered her a knife in the dark. She's not one of us, Valen insisted. She's my wife. She's your queen. And she's done more for this kingdom in 3 months than most of you have done in a lifetime. Reyes leaned forward, his gaze cutting. You want to talk about danger? Look in a mirror. The hall went silent. Reyes straightened. The sentence is exile. You have 3 days to gather your belongings and leave the northern territories. If you return, you'll be executed. Valen's face went white. You can't. I just did. Guards hauled the conspirators out. The hall erupted in whispers, shock rippling through the crowd. Kiera didn't move. She kept her face blank, her hands steady. But inside, something shifted. Reyes had just risked political fallout to defend her, publicly, completely. When the hall cleared, he turned to her. Are you all right? I should be asking you that. I'm fine. You just exiled 6 lords. They tried to kill you. His voice was flat. I'd have done worse if the law allowed it. Kiera's throat tightened. You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did. They'll use it against you. Say you're weak, controlled. Let them. He took her hand. I'm done pretending I don't care. I'm done hiding what you mean to me. Kiera's breath caught. What do I mean to you? Reyes' gaze held hers. Everything. The rebellion came 2 weeks later. It started in the western provinces, Thane's territory. Reports arrived at dawn, armed men marching on the capital, banners flying, demands for Kiera's removal from the throne. Reyes called an emergency council. Maps were spread across the table, strategies debated, alliances assessed. How many? Reyes asked. 500, Torrin said. Maybe more. They're rallying support as they move. Who's leading them? Lord Valen's son. He's calling it a righteous uprising. Kiera's stomach sank. Because of me. Because of fear, Reyes corrected. And ignorance. Corvin leaned forward. Your Majesty, if we send the army, it'll turn into a bloodbath. We need to negotiate. Negotiate? Reyes' voice was ice. They're marching on my capital, demanding I hand over my wife. What exactly do you suggest I negotiate? A compromise. Show them the queen is under control. That her power isn't a threat. She is under control. And her power is only a threat to people who deserve it. That's not the point. Then what is? Kiera stood. Every eye turned to her. Let me go, she said. The room went silent. Ray's expression darkened. Absolutely not. I'll go to them, talk to them, show them I'm not what they think. They'll kill you. Maybe, or maybe they'll listen. This is insane. This is the only way to stop it without a war. Kiera met his gaze. You know I'm right. Ray's jaw clenched. No. Raise, I said no. He turned to Torin. Ready the army. We march at dawn. Wait. Kiera crossed to him, her voice dropping. Please, let me try. I can't risk you. You're risking everyone if this turns into a battle. Hundreds will die, maybe thousands. And for what? Because they're scared of me? They should be scared of me, Ray's said. I'm the one who'll burn their world down if they touch you. And that's exactly the problem. Kiera's hand found his. They see you protecting me and think I've made you weak. Let me prove I haven't. Let me prove I'm worth protecting. Ray stared at her, his expression torn. If anything happens to you, his voice broke. It won't. You don't know that. No, but I trust myself. And you should too. Silence stretched. Finally, Ray's exhaled. You take 50 guards, and Torin, and you don't engage unless I give the signal. Deal. The rebels had set up camp outside the western border, their tents sprawling across a valley like a scar. Kiera rode at the front of her escort, her spine straight, her hands steady on the reins. Torin rode beside her. This is a bad idea. Noted. I mean it. These people want you dead. Then I'll have to convince them otherwise. And if you can't? Kiera didn't answer. They reached the camp at midday. The rebels saw them coming. Of course they did. By the time Kiera dismounted, a crowd had gathered, weapons drawn, faces hard. A man stepped forward, young, maybe 30, with Valen's eyes and his father's arrogance. You've got nerve, I'll give you that, he said. I've got a proposal, Kiera replied. Hear me out. If you still want me dead after, I won't stop you. Valen's son laughed. You think you can talk your way out of this? I think you deserve to hear the truth before you start a war. He studied her for a long moment. Then he gestured to his men. Lower your weapons. Let's hear what the cursed queen has to say. Kiera stepped forward into the center of the crowd. Hundreds of eyes watched her, hostile, suspicious, afraid. She took a breath. You're right to be scared, she said. I have power. Power I don't fully understand. Power that could hurt people if I lost control. But I haven't lost control. And I won't. Because I know what it's like to be feared for something you can't change. Pretty words, someone shouted. But words don't change what you are. No, they don't. I am dangerous, but so is fire. So is steel. So is the king. And you don't exile fire because it can burn. You learn to use it. You're not fire, Valen's son said. You're a plague. I'm a woman who was thrown away by everyone who should have protected her. A woman who survived when survival seemed impossible. And when the king, the most powerful man in the kingdom, was dying, I saved him. Not because I wanted power, not because I wanted a crown, but because it was the right thing to do. The crowd shifted. Not agreement. Not yet. But doubt. You want proof I'm not a threat? Kiera continued. Fine. Test me. Put me in a room with your strongest fighters, your best mages. Let them see what I can do. And when they see I'm in control, when they see I'm not the monster you think I am, you let this go. And if you're not in control, Valen's son asked, then you kill me, right here, right now. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Torin stepped forward. Your Majesty, you can't. I can. Kiera's gaze didn't leave Valen's son. What do you say? Do you want justice, or do you just want blood? Valen's son stared at her. Then he turned to his men. Bring the mage. But the test was brutal. They brought out a woman, older, gray-haired, her hands marked with sigils that glowed faintly in the dim light. A battle mage. Someone with real power. Make her fight you, Valen's son said. Prove you can control yourself when you're pushed. Kiera nodded. The mage stepped forward, her expression neutral. I won't hold back. I wouldn't want you to. The first attack came fast, a bolt of energy that crackled through the air. Kiera dodged, her power rising instinctively. She shaped it, controlled it, sent it back in a focused burst that dissipated before it hit the mage. The crowd murmured. The mage attacked again and again. Fire, ice, force, each one harder than the last. Kiera met every attack with precision. No wasted energy, no loss of control, just clean, deliberate defense. By the time the mage stopped, she was breathing hard. Kiera wasn't. Enough, the mage said. She turned to Valen's son. She's in control. Complete control. I've seen seasoned mages with less discipline. Valen's son stared at Kiera. How? Practice, training, and the will to be better than what people expect. He looked at his men, at the crowd, at the tents and weapons, and the rebellion that suddenly felt hollow. Stand down, he said quietly. What? Someone shouted. I said stand down. He turned to Kiera. You're not what we thought. I don't know if that makes you safe, but it makes you worth giving a chance. Kiera exhaled, her legs shaking. Thank you. He nodded once. Then he turned and walked away. The crowd dispersed slowly, reluctantly, but they dispersed. Torin appeared at her side. That was the stupidest, bravest thing I've ever seen. I had to try. You could have died. But I didn't. He shook his head. The king is going to lose his mind when he hears about this. Kiera smiled faintly. Probably. Reyes was waiting when she returned to the fortress. He didn't say anything, just pulled her into his arms and held her so tightly she could barely breathe. Don't ever do that again, he murmured against her hair. I can't promise that. Kiera, I can't, because this won't be the last time someone challenges me, or you, or us. And when it happens, I need to face it, not hide behind you. Reyes pulled back, his hands framing her face. You're going to kill me with worry. Better than the curse killing you for real. He laughed, short, broken. Fair point. I proved them wrong, Kiera said. I showed them I'm not a threat, not the way they thought. You showed them you're stronger than all of them combined. Same thing. No, it's not. Reyes' gaze held hers. You're not just surviving anymore, Kiera. You're leading, and people are starting to see it. The coronation happened a month later. Not a wedding, a real coronation. A ceremony where Kiera was crowned not as Reyes' political tool, not as a convenient marriage, but as a queen in her own right. The great hall was packed. Nobles from every corner of the kingdom, merchants from the south, even Lord Thane and his people from the west. All of them watching as Kiera knelt before the throne. Reyes stood beside her, his hand resting on her shoulder. Kiera Voss Dern, the officiant said, his voice echoing through the hall. You have proven your strength, your loyalty, and your worth. Do you swear to serve this kingdom, to protect its people, and to uphold the crown with honor? I do, Kiera said. Then rise, Queen Kiera, and take your place. She stood. The officiant placed a crown on her head, not gold, but silver, set with stones that caught the light and shimmered like stars. The hall erupted in applause. Not polite, not forced, real. Kiera looked out at the crowd and saw faces that had once sneered at her now bowing, saw lords who had called her worthless now offering respect. Reyes took her hand and raised it high. Your queen, he said. The applause grew louder. Autumn. That night, Kiera stood on the balcony, the crown still on her head, staring out at the mountains. Reyes joined her, 2 glasses of wine in hand. How does it feel? He asked. Strange. Good. Terrifying. That's ruling, Kiera smiled. I'm starting to figure that out. Reyes handed her a glass. I have something to tell you. What? The southern provinces sent word. The tariff agreement worked. Trade is up. Revenue is stable. And Garen asked if you'd be willing to negotiate a permanent deal. Kiera's eyes widened. Seriously? Seriously. Apparently you made an impression. I threatened them. You gave them a chance. There's a difference. Kiera sipped her wine, warmth spreading through her chest. I never thought I'd get here. Where? Somewhere that matters. Somewhere I'm not just surviving. Reyes set down his glass and pulled her close. You've always mattered. It just took the world a while to catch up. Kiera leaned into him, her head resting on his shoulder. I love you, she said quietly. I know. He kissed the top of her head. I love you too. 6 months later, the kingdom had changed. Kiera had established schools for children from the selection, places where they could learn trades, skills, futures that didn't end in exile or death. She'd negotiated treaties with neighboring territories, opened trade routes, and personally intervened in disputes that would have ended in bloodshed. The court no longer whispered about her, they came to her for counsel. And Reyes, who had spent his whole life ruling alone, now ruled beside someone who challenged him, supported him, and loved him without conditions. They weren't perfect. There were still fights, still disagreements, still moments when old wounds ached, but they were together. And in a kingdom built on ice and survival, that was more than enough. One evening, as snow began to fall outside the fortress, Kiera sat in the library reading reports when Reyes found her. "Come with me," he said. "Where?" "You'll see." He led her through the corridors to a room she'd never been in, small, warm, filled with books and maps and a fire that crackled in the hearth. "What is this?" she asked. "Yours? A study, a place to work, to think, to be yourself." Kiera stared at him. "You made this for me? You've earned it, 100 times over." Tears pricked her eyes. "Thank you." Reyes smiled, real, unguarded, the kind of smile she'd fought so hard to see. "Thank you for not giving up. On me, on us, on yourself." Kiera crossed the room and kissed him, soft, sure. When they pulled apart, she whispered, "I was never nothing." "No," Reyes agreed. "You were always everything. It just took me too long to see it." And in that moment, in a fortress that had once felt like a prison, Kiera finally felt like she was home.